You are listening to the Failed State Update. I am your host, Lenny Flatley. I am recording this live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This is the first episode of the Failed State Update, and the premise of the whole enterprise is that if the world's not ending, it sure as hell feels like something's ending. And let's have some conversations with people and, just try to get a sense of what's happening all around us. So for the first episode, we are going to talk to a couple militia leaders here in Pennsylvania. I just thought it was appropriate in light of all the protests that are scheduled to happen in a few days, largely through right-wing and gun groups, people protesting the quarantines. I wanted to get a hold of a couple militia guys and ask them what's going on. What are they thinking? So the whole premise of this show is conversations and communications. I'm a pretty committed leftist, but I don't think that means we can't talk to people and can't hear their stories and try to understand where they're coming from. But before we travel to rural Pennsylvania, let's talk to my buddy J.G. Michael, who is known for his podcast, Parallax Views, and is also a pretty good guy to run ideas off of.
Also, let me know in advance. Should I keep the what? So, do you want is your podcast clean or explicit? Which one is it?
I guess it's explicit. Yeah, say whatever the you want.
Okay, fair. Some people get weird about that. So.
Oh yeah, sure.
Well, thank you, Joseph, for having me on the Failed State Update. I want to thank you first and foremost. I'm always glad to speak with you. I've had you on the podcast Parallax Views a few times. And Parallax Views is quickly becoming the sort of current events, pop culture, sort of like leftist media space podcast that loves to have an adversarial relationship with its listeners. So if I do a podcast with someone you agree with, I will probably end up doing a podcast with someone you disagree with later. So I'm a bit all over the place, and I sort of like to challenge my listenership a lot. Previous guests include Gerald Posner. So if you have any conspiracy fans out there, I think I've already alienated all of them. Gerald Posner wrote the book Pharma recently, as well as he's most known in the conspiracy community for his book saying Lee Harvey Oswald is the lone gunman of the JFK assassination. I've had him on, the progressive radio host Michael Brooks, Tom Hartman, tons and tons of guests. So I've also had the Cherry Pie Girl on. Do you know her? Bobby Brown.
Bobby Brown from the video.
Right. She's my cherry pie. So I'm like really, really, really all over the place, and I cover whatever interests me. And that's what Parallax Views is all about. And hopefully listeners enjoy the show and also are challenged by it at times. I love that sort of adversarial relationship I have with the listeners.
I've been very curious lately. I've been tracking kind of what militias have been doing, and of course very interested in the reopen protests and the extent to which they are or could be, right-wing AstroTurf, basically, like the new Tea Party. First of all, it seems like the Insane Clown Posse are taking this pandemic thing very seriously.
No, the ICP is actually a pretty cool band.
What is it that draws you in? This magic that compels you? We've been waiting 6 fucking Joker cards to...
Yeah, kind of existing, they're obviously like a very legit working class response to poverty, being not the ruling class, not the oligarchy, and really suffering for it because, nobody suffers like a poor person in this country.
I think a lot of people will diss on ICP and be like, well, I listen to, conscious rap, like Immortal Technique. And I love Immortal Technique, but the same people I know that really like Immortal Technique will say to me, but I don't listen to that stuff like 2 Chainz. And I'm just like, there's like a weird classism to a lot of our musical tastes is what I'm getting at.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And, kind of going back to the theme of, us living in this failed state, Insane Clown Posse is like, and, the Juggalos really are like central casting. If somebody like in the 80s were, doing like a RoboCop type movie and wanted like, like the punks, how it's like in the 80s, they always had like the punks whenever they were in like the futuristic dystopia, everybody would run around with mohawks and stuff. Insane Clown Posse is like that come to life, or like the Juggalos is like that come to life.
Well, their face paint is awesome because it wrecks facial recognition software.
Yeah, they were really ahead of the curve on that one. And they just, released a statement saying that they had to cancel their this year's gathering of the Juggalos because I think the quote is, "We refuse to risk even one Juggalo life."
No, I completely dig that.
So, in stark contrast to the Insane Clown Posse's enlightened view of the pandemic, we've definitely seen...
Do you think that's what drives it, real quick, before we switch over? Do you think that communalism, that sense of like the Juggalos, they really do consider their fellow Juggalos family. And I think that's why, we don't even want one Juggalo dying of this thing. I think that's why it matters to them. Whereas most people, a lot of people in society, I should say, are very atomized, and it's like a dog-eat-dog world. The Juggalos are like the opposite of that. They're like, no, we're a community. We stick up for each other.
Oh, I think that has to be part of it. I think at the root of a lot of these decisions, are we going to take the pandemic seriously or not, is I think that's really like the end of a long line of, a long thought process that begins with like, do I trust the news? Am I pissed off at the president? There's like an unspoken ideological component to everybody's reaction to the coronavirus. And I don't take it that the Insane Clown Posse or their Juggalos, they don't seem like super political to me. Like their politics are down to earth and dealing with reality. It's like, they're not the kind of people who are worried about what Trump is saying. They're seeing the reality of this pandemic in a real like grassroots way. Like it's poor people and it's people of color who are being taken out by this much more than like rich white people.
Well, I was going to say, that's why the thing I've noticed about Juggalos is a lot of Juggalos will be very, very, very anti-fascist, right? But I've also heard them say, yeah, but we don't want to be like pandered to by left-wing groups. Like, we don't want to be a pawn in your game. We don't want to be used as your bludgeon to beat the other enemy political camp. And it seems like that plays into what you're saying.
Before we started talking today, I went for a drive and just kind of randomly like went up the interstate and then pulled off and was just going to see what I could see and then turn around and come back because I was sitting, I was getting a little stir crazy. And I happened upon the Allegheny Country Club, and which, I guess it's in Sewickley Heights. And if anybody asked me where it was or how to get there, I would have no idea. But since I was just driving around randomly, of course, I came across it. So I like drove into the, it's a country club, and, I only knew country clubs from Caddyshack.
I think this place is restricted, Wang, so don't tell me you're Jewish. Okay, fine.
As you start driving, like the trees disappear and there's all these like hills, and then you realize it's a golf course. And I just went all the way because I was like curious, and there were probably like 75, maybe 100 people out on these courses. And, they weren't social distancing. They obviously weren't wearing masks. They all had like the one golf glove on, which I don't think does anything. And I think that really, for me, just showed a difference between how this virus is affecting regular people and the people who, are rich and go to country clubs.
No, I think there's a lot of truth to that. What do you make of the reopen protests? Or I guess some people are calling them the Liberate the Economy protests. I have no clue.
So I spent a good deal of time talking to some militia people I know here in Pennsylvania over the last couple days. And I started out by calling Christian Yingling, who was the founder and the former leader of the Pennsylvania Lightfoot Militia. And he came to national prominence because he was like a militia leader in Charleston. And, you talk to him and he says he went there to make sure nobody got hurt and that, everybody had a right to free speech. And, but you only ever see him in the news when it's like I have a Google alert for his name, and it's like every time that there's like some kind of 2A protest or right-wing rally, he's always there. And it's like, it's just mentioned in the article, like asshole alert, this guy's here, so it's obviously bad news, but they never really talk to him. And I've, talked to him quite a few times over the last year or so. And he's not like a far right-wing racist figure by any stretch of imagination. He's doing his thing, and he's making his decisions, and I don't necessarily agree with him, but, I don't think he's like bullshitting me. But I talked to him about the protests, and he went to Harrisburg, and, he just sees it as really, an honest response to this economic crisis that we're going into as a result of the pandemic. And, and that's what I think a lot of the left and liberal media that's speaking out against these protests, which, I don't agree with them. I think we should all sit tight, but people are really losing jobs. They're not getting unemployment. They're getting much less unemployment than they were promised. These bailouts are giveaways to the rich. And I think this is a real response to something that's being discredited because, people see the Liberate people aligned with Trump and they don't like Trump.
It was loud, but peaceful as protesters lined both sides of Grant Street and were serenaded by drivers as they passed through.
What Governor Wolf is doing is not fair to us. He's not following the Constitution.
Among the crowd, there was the Iron City Response Unit, who arrived in full militia garb, complete with weapons. I asked why.
Why not?
So were you there with an organization or by yourself in Harrisburg?
Nope, that was the first one I went to by myself, so I had a lot of fun with it. It was actually kind of nice to go as a rally goer once instead of having to go and watch over teams that would provide security or whatever.
This is Christian Yingling, the former head and founder of the Pennsylvania Lightfoot Militia and the current founder of the Pennsylvania Volunteer Militia.
First off, before we get going here, I am no longer with the Lightfoot. I have been doing this for over 10 years now. And, I really needed to step away for a while. And, I just figured it was time. You know what I mean? It was really time. I don't have any ill will toward the guys or anything like that. It was nothing like that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. This new thing I got going, it's really picking up a lot of steam. As a matter of fact, a lot faster than I thought it would. You know what I mean? I've been really busy, trying to get everything together at the ground level. I've got interest from across the state already, for people that want to join up. One of the different things that I'm kind of really pushing with this new organization is that I'm really getting away from the right-left political paradigm. I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you're a Republican, a Libertarian, or whatever, or a little green man from Mars. It doesn't matter. If you're willing to stand up for the Constitution and our rights, and then, you're more than welcome.
What's the name of your group?
It's going to be called the Pennsylvania Volunteer Militia. Named after the first militia that Ben Franklin stood up during the Spanish-American War.
We talked. I spoke to John Wagner yesterday.
Wagz. Right?
Wagz. Yeah, I talked to Wagz, and we talked quite a bit about my concerns, and I guess his concerns that the Liberate the states and the anti quarantine protests and stuff were being used or could be used by like far right figures, like racist figures, as a recruiting opportunity. And I'm wondering, did you see any of that when you were in Harrisburg? Or
No, and I'd actually, even now that you mention it, I'd even spoken to Wagz about that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I voiced my displeasure to him that I had spent, like I said, 10 plus years building this organization to just for reasons just like this. You know what I mean? And he was talking to me about alternate agendas, and I said, dude, there was no alternate agendas out there. Not that I saw. You know what I mean? If you kind of want to, spitball something like that, talking hypotheticals and whatnot, the possibility of it. I mean, the possibility is it could be used by either side. You know what I mean? Anybody who has the ability to manipulate a situation and portray it in a certain manner, and it carries enough charisma, you know what I mean, can convince people, to believe any myriad of things.
Sure.
But the reality of the situation is, and this is why I don't get any intel off of Facebook, is that, at that rally, there's a lot of upset people there.
Yeah.
And rightfully so, in my opinion. But what really kind of set me back there, really made me take a step back and really almost even shocked me, was how happy everybody was.
Yeah.
And I think that was due probably in large part to the fact that, people have been cooped up for so long. Not only do you have the natural inclination of, cabin fever from being in all winter, and now that it's finally starting to warm up, people want to get out. You know what I mean? They want to get out. They want to do things. It's in the bad timing of this all, you know what I mean? So now people are being forced to stay in even longer. And not only are they being forced to stay in even longer, but they're being forced to stay in when a lot of them are healthy.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, the vast majority of them are healthy. I mean, if you crunch the numbers, you're talking about less than 1% of the population here in the state of Pennsylvania,
right?
That have contracted this disease, and and they're crushing the state. That's what kills me. They're crushing the state. Businesses are folding up. I mean, I'm seeing it in my own hometown. Businesses are folding that have been here forever because they can't take that kind of hit.
Mm-hmm.
And, these smaller businesses, these mom and pop businesses, especially like out here in the more rural areas, where you don't have so many of the big prevalent corporations. Of course we have the Walmarts and the Targets and the things of those natures, you know what I mean? But, for the most part out in these areas, it's mostly like small business owners, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And these guys really get beat up, you know what I mean? Not to mention the people, that are, when you look at people who aren't even business owners, just your average family. A lot of these families are used to buying one meal a day. They may have multiple children, because their kids are used to eating breakfast and lunch at school. Right. I ran into an instance of that in Walmart where a woman in front of me was she had 3 full shopping carts, Lenny, and I'm talking heaping over with groceries. She spent $800. And I was like, wow, you're really getting ready for this, huh? Just making small talk. And she said, no, it's not that. She said, it's that I have 3 teenage boys and now they're stuck at home. She said, now I have to feed them 3 meals a day, plus myself and my husband who can't go to work. It's just simple things like that. Their grocery bills are skyrocketing. They can't go to work. And, some people have been off for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, I myself, I got lucky. I only got furloughed for 2 weeks before Governor Wolf came out and designated machine shops as essential businesses, which, we absolutely are. I mean, machinists are the basis of society. There's nothing you touch that a machinist hasn't touched before you. And in our particular case, we do a lot of work for the gas and oil industry. We do a lot of work for, the medical field. So, if we're not turning out these parts for, the gas companies and whatnot, people don't have heat, so it's things of that nature. Medical, like I said, some of the medical stuff we make, so I got kind of lucky, I was only off 2 weeks, and luckily for me, I make enough money that, I had a little bit of money socked away in the bank, nothing great, nothing that, I just breezed through this. I'm just as concerned as anybody else, the belt got tight and the bank account drained, but I had enough that it got me through it, and now I'm starting to get back to normal because I'm back to work now, but like this whole unemployment debacle, my God. They promised everybody 100% unemployment. I got 30% of my wages. It's crazy days we live in. As far as, your question, do I think there were alternate agendas out there? No, I don't. I mean, I didn't see anything. What I saw Republicans and Democrats standing together, speaking in unison, saying, look, we want to go back to work. You're ruining our state. You're crushing our lives. It's not that I really kind of feel that, a lot of people in higher power positions, a lot of these politicians and whatnot, these guys are millionaires. They can take that kind of hit. They can sit at home for a month. You know what I mean? But people like me, people like you who, are living week to week, you know what I mean? Just trying to pay the bills and, doing, the 9-to-5 grind or whatever. For us, if that's a different story.
And then, at the same time, Nancy Pelosi is worth $120 million. Whose interest is she going to be looking out for,
Exactly. Precisely. And, one very interesting thing that I'm seeing, Lenny, is that more and more often you're seeing the left and the right coming together, which is what I have been pressing for the last 10 years. I took an immense amount of heat for working with the left in Virginia, but it has to happen, man. We have to come together as Americans because we are getting fleeced. We are getting robbed blind. As well as I do. I mean, you seem like a smart guy. I'm sure you understand the wage inequality. If you're a Republican, you can sit there and talk about capitalism, okay? And I respect that. I'm by nature a Republican, but I also understand where the left is coming from with the wage inequality. When 1% of this country holds 99% of the wealth, we've got a problem. The state promised us 100% unemployment. We didn't get that, and like I told you, I got a $300 check, and not only that, but, with all these people applying, things are getting delayed. Some people haven't got their unemployment yet, some have. And then a stimulus check of $1,200, like I said, the longer this goes on, the less and less that's going to help. And I'm not asking by any stretch of the imagination for, Big Daddy government to come take care of me. You know what I mean? But at the same time, when I have an employer who's a millionaire, and 1 week's pay wouldn't even put a dent in his bank account. It's stuff like that I can agree with the left on. You know what I mean? So that's why in this new organization I'm putting together, it's not going to be a right-wing organization. It's not going to be a left-wing organization. It's going to be a constitutional organization. It's going to be an organization that I don't care if you're left, right, or otherwise. If your rights are being trampled upon, we're going to be there to make sure that we can do anything we can to keep that from happening.
In your new group, are you still in touch with the left-wing militias that we've talked about?
Oh yeah, I was just talking to them 2 days ago, which is funny because we've hit, and I knew it was going to happen eventually, but we've hit one of those spots where we just kind of tried to agree to disagree. They kind of, at least the guys I talk to, you know what I mean? The guys that I talk to they're not necessarily against the whole quarantine thing. You know what I mean? They have elderly family or whatever, and their reasons for supporting it are their own, and I'm not going to disrespect them for that. You know what I mean? And I'm not going to disrespect their opinion. Their opinion's worth just as much as mine. If that's what they want to believe, and that's the great thing about the guys that I talk to. You know what I mean? Is we're both level-headed. You know what I mean? Enough that we can agree to disagree and still be friends.
What responsibility do militias have to kind of police their organization?
Their own ranks?
Yeah, well, yeah, that, but also the larger kind of right-wing 2A movement, which, you know, because there's a lot of far right-wing Nazi types and racists, which gives you guys a bad name, obviously, but also are just legitimately dangerous. But like how much of a role do you think that you guys, the moderate people in the movement, have to play in kind of policing the fringe element?
I think that, now again, you're touching on something that, you know, it hits really close to home for me because, you know, and this goes back to Charlottesville.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we went to Charlottesville, okay, a lot of people misconstrued the fact of us going there as we were going there to protect these racists, these Nazis, these, you know, dickheads, and they're human trash, you know. And I was one of the very first people that, you know, literally the day after Charlottesville, well, maybe it was like 2 days after, because the first day after I was an absolute mess. I mean, holy PTSD. But you know, but I was one of the first people to step out and call out those guys and say, you know, look what you just did to that town.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you thought it was all funny, you know, when like Jason Kessler thought it was all funny walking into community meetings with a boombox on his shoulder like he was a wrestler walking to the ring with music coming blasting out, you know, like he was making some sort of entrance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they thought it was a big game, you know, and a woman ended up dead.
Yeah.
So I think the more moderate groups on both sides, not just the right or the left, but both sides, you know, I think the more moderate groups really need to take a more active role in stepping up and calling these people out. I just did it again with that Sydney Horton.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? This girl is a full-on self-professed, you know, white supremacist. I mean, she wrote a paper about, you know, Jews being depopulated. You know, and no, I'm not going to sit back and stand for that, because you're right. They do give us a bad name. You know, so I think we have an immense responsibility to stand up to that. And I did. And I took an amazing amount of heat for it. I mean, in the Patriot community, you know, I got blasted. And I mean, it was merciless, man. I mean, they really came after me.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's not going to change what I believe. And I do. I think absolutely 100%. I think the militia should be the first people to stand up to these skinheads.
Looking forward, like maybe like 1 or 2 steps into the future, as far as like the pandemic and the response and the economic crisis that's going to happen because of this. Like, what do you see happening, and what do you think your response will be?
You know, I told my wife, I said, I have called every bit of this from the very beginning. Like from when the time they first announced it, you know, and I mean, I told my wife, I said, okay, oh boy, I said, this is serious. You know, when it really started picking up steam across Europe and stuff like that, and we were waiting for it to hit us here. And I said to my wife, I said, you're going to see a lockdown here. I said, they're going to quarantine everybody. I said, you mark my words. And sure enough, it happened. And I said, you know what's coming next, right? And she's like, what's that? And I said, the first 2 weeks are going to be fine. I said, because most people can absorb that. It's going to hurt, but it's not going to kill them. I said, if it starts dragging out, you know, 5, 6, 8 weeks, I said, people are going to take to the streets. Whammo, Harrisburg happens. You know, it happened in Michigan. It's happened in how many states now where people are protesting this quarantine. And then I told my wife, I said, you know what's coming next. You know, and she said, yeah, next are going to come the riots. You know, what I believe is going to happen is what I see happening is I think these protests are going to continue. You know, this first one, it was all happy. Like I said, I think people were just happy to be out of their houses. You know, they're happy to be amongst other people. But as these protests continue, I believe that they're going to start getting angrier and angrier, because, as this drags on, it's going to start hurting people more and more. And then when they show up at these rallies, they're not going to be showing up with a smile anymore. Now they're going to be showing up yelling. And that's going to go on. And then at the next one, someone's going to start throwing rocks. And then after that, people are going to start rioting. They're going to straight start rioting. They're going to start busting store windows. They're going to start taking what they need to feed their families. And if it doesn't stop when riots start, God help us all, Lenny, because I think you're going to start seeing politicians get ripped out of their houses.
Hi, I'm Colonel Bo Greitz, United States Army Special Forces. I'm excited to be able to bring you a series of training videos known as SPIKE. SPIKE is an acronym. It stands for Specially Prepared Individuals for Key Events. When 911 cannot or will not, for whatever reason, respond to your distress, then this training will prepare you to take care of yourself and those that love and depend upon you, your family, your church members, your neighborhood.
I look at someone like, Colonel Bo Gritz, and I'm like, Bo Gritz, he was like the poster boy of the militias for like the longest time. I think he's still alive too. I think he still has like some weird Christian identity style commune.
Like in Idaho or something.
Yeah, people like Gritz, I think are like very covertly racist and actually deal with, straight up Christian identity, white supremacist types. But I think the militias are much more complex in a lot of ways than people realize. A lot of it to me is just people that want their guns.
All right, so this is an important point. The militia movement, the right-wing movement, the Second Amendment or 2A movement are not this monolith. And I think that where I have the problem with them is that I don't agree with what they do necessarily, and I think that what they do comes from like a misunderstanding of history and things like gun rights and the Constitution. But that's just a disagreement. I can't hate somebody because we disagree on that. But
do you feel that way about the sort of left-wing side of things too, like John Brown Gun Club and stuff like the Socialist Rifle Association? I'm just curious how you feel about their view on gun rights.
I haven't done enough looking into that. Like my very shallow kind of. No, I'll just say I haven't done enough of that looking into that. I mean, the fact of the matter is some people need guns, and the fact of the matter is, the left-wing militias took a look at the reality of the situation and decided the best way to protect their rights is to arm themselves. Time will tell if that's a wise decision or not. There's a reason that I don't have guns and I don't go to militia meetings.
No, I get where you're coming from on that, but for instance, I've known left-wing militia types who are trans, right? Mm-hmm. And I get where they're coming from, because if you live in certain parts of Florida or even certain parts of Pennsylvania, right, mm-hmm. It can be very, very bad to be trans. And what I mean by bad is people will harass you.
You will die.
You are in danger.
Right.
Essentially. And I get why there are very militant trans people in some of these militias who are like, I need a gun, mm-hmm. because I'm not going to put up with this. Now, I think if they actually did something in self-defense,
they wouldn't get treated like George Zimmerman.
Right. So I don't know how to feel about all of that, but I empathize with where they're coming from.
I understand self-defense, and I understand the disparity of power and the state monopoly on violence. Where I get tripped up is when I see a right-wing militia and it's like 40 guys who have all been active duty, in war zones, in the Middle East or whatever, that are all like 6'4" and muscular and train every other weekend or whatever. And then I see a bunch of like people who are basically my peers who are like 5'4", weigh 125 pounds, like, what if we get to the point where it becomes like violence in the streets, like Antifa versus Oath Keepers or something? I mean, I just talked to a guy that owns like 4 or 5 military vehicles,
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like, point I'm making is that I think the left loses if we take on armed militia groups at their, if we let them set the rules of the engagement. But
I think there's probably truth to that, by the way.
yeah, and I want to even get away from that because that's not really what we're talking about when we talk about the two, the Pennsylvania militias I've been in contact with. Militias everywhere are different. Militia of Montana, or like, the left half of the country seems to be a lot more dangerous and, ultra right wing. This part of the country, it seems to be like a lot less of that. Like,
it's funny you mention that because I always tell people, isn't it interesting that some of the biggest neo-Nazi movements over the years, it wasn't necessarily coming from Pennsylvania or like a Florida or a really conservative state. A lot of times it was coming from places like California. That's where a lot of the skinhead stuff came from.
Yeah. Even like Portland, the hotbed of Antifa versus alt-right.
Yeah, it's like every week at this point they're fighting.
Yeah.
Well, probably not now because of the pandemic. But...
Right. But that's not what we're talking about here. And I think the point I've been trying to make, even though I haven't been able to do it very well, is that the right-wing militias have to kind of like confront the fact that they are part of the larger right-wing continuum, which includes the far right and includes racists. And
well, it includes stuff like I mentioned Bo Gritz and his sort of playing footsie with Christian identity. I mean, yeah, that stuff does have to be confronted.
Yeah, and then like so to the extent that the guys I'm talking to are confronting that, and they are, they're aware of it and they're confronting that, I definitely think that needs to be applauded. So we'll see where they go with all this. It'll be pretty interesting.
Over the weekend, Pennsylvania came undone. I noticed the militia rolled up in large numbers to let the authorities there know that, look, we about had all we're going to take from you elected officials who want to keep your boot on the back of our necks.
Yeah, so I think that the idea that Governor Tom Wolf or Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman has their boots on somebody's neck is a little far-fetched. But that's just me. Next, we're going to hear from Wagz, a.k.a. John Wagner, the current executive officer of the Pennsylvania Lightfoot Militia. He was not at the anti-quarantine rally in Pittsburgh, and I think his reasoning is pretty interesting. So let's hear from him. All right, so we're recording. And just before we start, could you give me your name and where you're located?
My name is John. I am located in a small town, mountain town, in northeast Cambria County.
Could I get your last name?
Wagner is my last name.
Wagner, oh, hence.
Wagz. It was actually my nickname in the military.
All right, cool. What branch were you in?
I've served in both the Navy and the Army, so
all right. And
I taught a lot of different.
Yeah. What do you do for a living?
I work in the transportation industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to leave it at that, if you don't mind.
And are you the spokesperson for the?
I am currently the executive officer.
And when did that?
I took over probably as EXO probably around December, January timeframe.
How's work right now with the pandemic and the lockdowns and everything?
It's holding steady for me and my coworkers. It's holding steady. It'll pick up, it'll drop off, it'll pick up, it'll drop off. It does. The political climate of the country has a lot to do with how much I'm working or how light I'm working. the stock market, we watch that very closely to kind of see what we're going to be getting into and what we're not going to be getting into. It's kind of a rough industry to track. And my father used to always say the industry is either feast or famine, and he's absolutely correct.
Speaking of the political climate, I'm curious what's going on with the militia in light of the fact that with all these lockdowns and things.
Well, some people have taken it to the point of disobedience, which I personally myself and the current CEO had very, very many hours of conversation on this, as well as some of the other CEOs of different units. And with the lockdown, even though it's kind of a gray area because it really wasn't an order and it really wasn't a law, it really wasn't this, it really wasn't that. And then you have to look at the best interest of what the public interest. And if our guys, most of our folks, they go out unless they have a medical condition that prevents the mask. They're usually covering their face. Me personally, I've been wearing my shemagh. If I have to stop on the way to work somewhere to pick something up, I just wrap it around my face real quick, go in and get what I need and get the heck out. We're not out running into the Walmart and staying at Walmart all day or, doing the stuff that we did before this. We're kind of taking this seriously because a lot of us have a bunch of different views on how this happened, what happened, and we've decided to take a course to protect us as well as the public to help curb the spread of this. Because you hear people say, oh, it's made up, oh, it's this, oh, it's that, oh, it's this. They're joking about it. A lot of us see in a different view that it is a real thing. I've got friends of mine that were doctors in the Army, and they got out, now they're back in private practice. I've got one friend of mine that is in New York right now, and he's constantly posting stuff. New York is a hotbed for this COVID. So he's up there. I'm constantly watching him and keeping an eye on him. And it's a fine line we do walk. Which way do you go with it? And you have to look and make the best projection you can make, taking all the information you can take in and make the best possible decision on what you have. And, to protect yourself is a primary thing. That's why we weren't out in the limelight. We weren't out, in the whole heads up of it because we knew it was going to be a total cluster. It was going to be a mess, and we knew that. We saw that. So that's why we steer clear of all that. And I really didn't want our people out there because we have families that we have to tend after as well. And I didn't want somebody going to a rally, personally myself. I didn't want to see somebody going to the rally, and then coming home. The next thing you know, the whole doggone family's down, and it's my fault. I can't have that on my back. I can't. Like I said, I've been putting out fires and arguing with people all week over this. Just because we didn't show up towards one rally, or I didn't show to a rally, or our people didn't want to go. Don't tell me that I'm wrong because we took protective measures for our family. Some of the groups are head on. We're going to do this. We're going to do that, and then you got groups like us that, hey, we're going to hold tight and see what's going on. Because you don't want to act first. You want to think and then act. And some folks aren't thinking and acting. They're just acting. Pittsburgh, the guys in Pittsburgh, they acted. They didn't think before they went. They just acted. Some folks in Harrisburg acted. I know I saw a photo from the Harrisburg rally of a militia in the back of a deuce and a half heavily armed. That's really not the way to go. Not something like that. And now how cool that is. Okay, deuce and a halves are cool. I own one, but I own several military vehicles because I'm a collector. But your common sense rules. Common sense rules in a situation like this, and a lot of them aren't using that common sense.
Do you think that this protest movement that's growing up around the quarantine and defying the quarantine, do you think that's grassroots, or is there money coming from political organizations that are trying to use this as a political tool?
I would say I'm going to go with the political end of it just myself, because, politics generates money, money generates politics.
Speaking kind of about, my headphones popped out and I couldn't hear myself for a second. It was really confusing. Kind of conversely, and I won't keep you on the phone for much longer.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. The only thing I was going to do today was pull my Jeep out and fire it up and let it run for a little bit.
Okay. Well, I'm wondering, I've attended quite a few of these two-way protests here in Pittsburgh, and there's always a contingent that comes out that's like the far right, like racist or fascist, part of the 2A movement.
To be honest with you, when we come across something like that, or we feel that there's an inclination of that, we recuse ourselves from it immediately. We walk away from it. I will not have that within the PA Lightfoot. I refuse to let that occur within the PA Lightfoot, simply because it's unexcusable. But do I see groups out there that could be racist? Absolutely. Proud Boys is one. In my eyes, the Proud Boys, they say they take this, they take that, they take this, they take that. But in all honesty, if you look at them recently, since they've had a shift in their chain of command, they've turned to the alt-right. And when those guys show up at a rally, I'm watching those guys like hawks, because I'm Messianic Jew. And, the pastor I normally follow is within the Second Amendment community. And, I'm not going to sit there and take that crap from anybody.
Have you guys had people join that turned out to be like alt-right or racist that you had to let go, or how did you handle that?
Well, we screen our people very, very closely. When somebody applies to us, we screen them very closely. The first thing we do, one of the things we do is not only do we pull a criminal background check on them to see what they're like, we sit down and we have a long conversation with them to feel them out. And then we also look at their social media. Social media will tell you a lot about a person and how they feel. And, we look at a social media, we ask questions of other groups that, hey, we see we've got somebody, we'll look at their friends list. Okay, well, we know this person. So, we're a mutual friend with this person. So we pick up the phone and we call them and we talk to them. And if we're catching anything bad that we don't like, we don't take them. I haven't had an incursion. I've had felons try to apply, but your background check, it'll clean that right out. One thing I do is I pull them for their license to carry firearm permit. If they can't produce that, then that tells me either A, they never went and got it, or B, they can't get it. And if you have a felony on your record, you're not going to be able to obtain a firearms license. So there's several ways to go around looking for that kind of stuff. But if we find them, like I said, we find them and they put in, we get rid of them immediately, or we just gap them off because we won't deal with it.
Where is your PA Lightfoot Militia? Where is it headquartered, or what's your jurisdiction?
We are all over the state, just as before when Christian ran everything. We really didn't change much. We're all over the state. We don't have one central headquarters. We move wherever we need to. All the different command elements talk within themselves. So if I need to talk with, say, the commander of, let's just say, Berks County, I pick up the phone and call him. There's really no one central office anymore. It's all over. So where Christian would have told you that was centralized where he lived at, we've taken that, we've expanded that to the point that there really is no centralized office, so we can shift and flux as needed. We've made it more I don't want to say user-friendly, but that's the term I'm going to use for whatever we need to do.
How many members do you have?
Boy, to be honest with you, I actually don't know that number. As far as the leadership goes, we don't pull numbers until we really, really need to. If I've been called, like, say we get contacted, like there's the Second Amendment rally coming up here in Harrisburg, in a month. And if they call us and say, hey, we need this many people, can you support it? Okay, well, let me get back to you on that and then see what I can round up. And I can offer you this many to assist. This is how many have volunteered. And that's all they get. We don't give out straight up 100% numbers, on all honesty. I won't do that.
Do you, can you give me like just a vague idea, like 10, 100, 1,000? Like...
I can tell you this much, there's more than 10.
Okay.
I've got to stop at my own unit.
All right.
no, there's definitely a good size number out there. You know.
In Michigan, Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer has extended a state of emergency declaration until May 28th over the objections of Republican state lawmakers. On Thursday, hundreds of protesters defying social distancing rules, many of them armed with assault rifles and wearing tactical gear, descended on Michigan's state capitol in Lansing, demanding a lifting of remain-at-home orders. The crowd packed into the Capitol rotunda tried to storm onto the floor of the legislative chamber. Lawmaker Dana Pahanke tweeted a photo of armed men looking down from the gallery. She wrote, "Directly above me, men with rifles yelling at us. Some of my colleagues who own bulletproof vests are wearing them."
We have a right. Let us in. Let us in. Let us in. No more rainbows. No more. Heil Hitler. Heil Hitler. The winner. The winner.
It seems appropriate to mention here, before I sign off, a recent story in the Washington Post. The headline was, "The anti-quarantine protests seem spontaneous, but behind the scenes a powerful network is helping." The article outlines the fake grassroots efforts, or astroturfing, of prominent Republicans, including the Mercer family, whose Convention of States organization is pushing these reopen rallies, giving the impression that there is more support for the movement than is actually the case. The article quotes Eric O'Keefe, a board president of Citizens for Self-Governance, which is the parent organization of Convention of States. We're providing a digital platform for people to plan and communicate about what they're doing, he says, which sounds harmless, but I think we all know that when powerful people with money, create platforms, it isn't out of the goodness of their hearts. Another quote worth reading in full. The group's president, Mark Meckler, said his aim was to act as a clearinghouse where these guys can all find each other. FreedomWorks, a libertarian advocacy group also active in the Tea Party movement, is seeking to play a similar function, creating an online calendar of protests. I guess the point I'm trying to get here is that the Second Amendment movement and the Liberate or Reopen the States movements are joined at the hip, which is obvious if you've even looked at any footage of what's happening. And it almost doesn't make sense that these two groups would be, unless the real goal of the Reopen movement is to whip up, the political base of a certain president. Thanks for listening to the Failed State Update. This is a first episode, but there will be many more. If you want to follow me on Twitter, just search for Lenny Flatley. If you want more info about the podcast, about me, my books, my stories, my articles, or you want to reach out, go to my website, lennyflatley.net.
Watch out for martial law. He's there to prove who owns the muscle and might. And he just might pull you over to the side of the shoulder, cause he cannot see your license plate light. Because he cannot see your license plate light. Ain't it a frightening feeling when you're behind the wheel?